everyone. Welcome. We're going to be talking about the blue economy today and everything related to it across the supply chain of our wonderful industry, specifically for cosmetics and how it affects the cosmetic industry. We are joined today by Diego Lapetina, who is going to be talking about the brand side of things and the storytelling. We have Courtney Howell from Fathoms. She's going to be talking about products and the ingredients and her first-hand experience with seaweeds and the journey to get there. And then myself, Margarita Sidorova from the Canadian Cosmetic Cluster, now working within Beauty by the Sea project to connect all the industry professionals to the blue economy and most importantly, why it's important to do it. So first of all, what is the blue economy? The blue economy is actually quite massive. It's everything related to the supply chain of this industry. Particularly, it could be shipping, it could be ingredients, such as from the alginates, from the kelps. Packaging now is more increasingly done, products, and it's the tourism aspect. It's basically everything related to making money from the waterways, transportation included. So Courtney, what does the blue economy mean for you?
For me, it's a growing way of life. My family lives right on the Atlantic in rural Newfoundland. And for us, it's about developing economy in this very rural area along the ocean and growing a sustainable way of life out here. And for us, the cosmetic industry and working with seaweed is an amazing opportunity to work sustainably with our oceans to do that.
I definitely agree with that. And actually, my own personal journey in the blue economy really starts with the fact that I love the ocean. I love the sea. I think a lot of us do in the blue economy. We use it, whether it's for sports, whether it's for leisure, and now also economically. And we love it and we want to protect it.
The goal for the blue economy is not just one point, is to create this whole ecosystem where you can actually take advantage from each one of those different parts.
Yes, yes. And I think, Courtney, your brand is a perfect example of that. You can tell us how you take from the sea and then what you use it for.
Yeah, so right now we definitely want to get into aquaculture, but to start, we're doing a sustainable wild harvest and talking with our farmers now in Newfoundland about growing the species that we work with. But it is about sustainably harvesting and eventually leading into a sustainable aquaculture practice. And it even starts with how we do extraction. We don't dry the seaweed that we work with. We use wet seaweed.
Yeah.
So the way that we extract, we need a relatively small amount of seaweed to make a high amount of high bioactive extract. So that's another way that we work to be sustainable. And then after extraction and formulating, using that final seaweed for another purpose. Right now. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
No, I have a question for you. How, like you talk about wild harvesting. How does that work? How does that look like for someone that's curious like me?
So it's actually a pretty labor-intensive process. We work with our Department of Fisheries so that we have a license under them. They advise us on how to harvest because they also want to protect the seaweeds, but they want to know more about it as well. So the way that we harvest, it's by hand. We're only allowed to use a knife when we harvest, and we cut above reproductive areas so that the plant can release, the seaweed can release its spores. Probably around this time of year, it's probably already happened now, so that it can, regenerate for the next year. Seaweeds grow relatively fast. We honor fallow periods, so we don't harvest in the same areas that we did the previous year. And when we're in a seaweed bed, we can only harvest a certain percentage of that bed. And the whole while we are documenting. We're documenting where we are. We're documenting how much we've harvested. And we have to do a survey harvest first, which uses a 10-inch ring, so that we can let our Department of Fisheries know, this is about how much seaweed is in, how thick it is or how the health of that seaweed in that area. So it's a whole process of really working with the ocean to make sure we're not clear cutting anything and that we're setting it up for regrowth for the next year.
So how much you harvest? I'm because when people think about like land harvesting, we're talking about tons. I'm guessing you're not doing tons.
We don't. We harvest just like a few thousand pounds. And again, that kind of goes back to our extraction process that we don't need. We're extracting what's within the cell walls of the seaweed. So we're not, if we were working with dried seaweed, we'd need a whole lot more. The beginning is challenging because you have to, you're moving forward with your values of sustainability. So you're having to figure out new processes that you can scale. So that you're figuring it out at a small level first so that you can adopt sustainable practices as you grow and scale.
And I find that's very challenging often because it's a very new industry, especially for the seaweed side of it. So in North America and in Europe, 90% or around 90% of it comes from Asia for the commercial market. So if you can imagine North America and Africa and I guess a little bit of South America and largely North America and Europe all take that little chunk. So we don't produce a lot. And the reason for that is it's relatively new for us. We grow it differently, I feel, than in Asia. It's a different approach to growing it. So we really have to think about how to do it. I find that's the difficult part is also marrying the business aspect to be profitable, to generate new sources of income and be sustainable and have the science and like where do you go. And I think this is really it's exciting to be forefront, but then there's things what you're trying to invest into or trying to go forward and there's no one to tell you, there's no guidance, which is very different from, for example, when I got into cosmetics, it was a very developed industry. This is a lot of guesswork. You're trying to figure things out.
You do have seaweed farms, right? That's something that happens.
You do have seaweed farms, and there's seaweed farms all around the world. Some of them are massive, some of them are small, some of them are pilot scale, because especially regulatory wise, you have to figure out many countries are not set up to do the licensing for them perfectly yet. So it's a lot of a work in progress, but it's a bit different in terms of you're growing it usually on lines. So it's and you have to see when you're growing a species, is the species local? Is it from another harbor? If it's from another harbor, is it still considered local? There's a lot of questions to be asked. So there's figuring out all of that is what this industry is actually working on right now.
So I guess there is a lot of synergy between business, research, and people creating products like Courtney.
I know for us, when we're talking with our farmers now, who are kind of at beginning stages, turbulency and temperature is another big factor.
That's a big one. Viruses, we're seeing, especially in places in all over the world, that can be affected. Both mussels, both seaweed, both fish. That can completely. I think I was reading in Tanzania, the red seaweeds are quite affected by certain, and that is because of the global warming. The higher the temperature, the more viruses, right? The more bacteria that can survive at untimely, unseasonal rates. Because I think especially for our hemisphere, most of the farming is done over the winter. It's a winter crop. You put it in October, November, and then harvest it in May, April, depending on what you're growing.
Yeah, for us, turbulency and temperature also correlate with the level of bioactivity.
Yes.
In the seaweeds, which is definitely a really important part for us. So we've been when we harvest, when we extract, we document the bioactivity levels, and we're hoping that helps guide us as we start working with farmers as well.
As well as salinity.
So,
how many farmers around your region, Courtney? There's a lot of farmers, like a few farmers.
Newfoundland is a pretty small place, but we're set up for it. We have 3 farmers right now that we're talking with, who are kind of just getting started. One's a little bit further ahead, but we're talking with all 3, and it's just going to take time because of the species that we work with. They're a little bit more challenging to grow, so it's going to take all of us working together and knowledge of other institutions and people like Margarita this is very much an interdisciplinary
Yeah.
effort. And it's so nice, that we're all at the beginning stages of this industry. Because, a lot of us go are in this industry in seaweed and the blue economy, with sustainability at the forefront. And, at the forefront, yes, we all need to make a living. We all need to grow businesses. But this is about solving some real world problems as well, and transitioning into new types of ingredients and sustainability. We don't have a choice. We have to do it. So it takes all these minds to get it going. It's actually it's an honor to be a part of it at this stage, especially to be working with so many great minds getting this going.
I think one of the big challenges is the farms. Everybody needs to grow at the same time because the farms need to scale up. They need people to get more and grow more biomass. You have to almost confirm it. You have to also be able to sell it. Brands need to be able to use it, and the consumers need to be able to want it. So all across, and then investors have to understand. Because when you talk to investors a lot of the time about the blue economy, I get everything from, as I said, from beach questions to sushi. Is this about sushi? So people don't understand what they're investing into. So this is something that needs to be, I think, educated more on. There are Capital, I think Ocean Capital 14, and there's a few other foundations and investment firms that only do blue economy around the world. And they have specialists, because it's not just about finding investors, it's about finding people who can guide you as a business, right? And this is what I still feel like we're lacking. And shout out to Sam's from Oban, because they have a program with Europe where they do that. It's business plus aquaculture together. And that was a great program to be a part of, because that was how I understood the business aspect of it. Yeah.
You recently have been to Europe, right, Margarita, doing the sports. What are the key differences between North America and Europe when it comes to the blue economy?
We're actually in a lot more similar stage. Still, a lot of it is wild harvested. Europe really is big, especially France is 80-90% wild harvested. I think so. I just I talked about this morning with a client, and I find that economies, Scotland's really good with this. Greece is going to become a big player, I tell you. It's because if fishing, and I think Newfoundland is another part of the why if the fishing communities were active, it's easier to transition to growing seaweeds. They have the equipment, they have the boats, they have the labor and the mindset, and they're able to tolerate to being in the ocean, because it's not something that everyone can do. You get sick because you're going out in the winter times. It's very turbulent, and you're going to have to seed, and you're going to have to do this and that. It's not easy. It's a very difficult thing to do. There's a lot of, no matter, even if you're wild harvesting or aquaculture, it's very labor intensive. And then when you're harvesting it, you have a time when you have to process it because it releases gases. There's a lot of been poisonings from seaweed. So it's a very, very different kind of approach. And if you're not in that space, not all economies, even if they're connected to the ocean, are ready to embrace it. But I find that Greece has been doing this pretty well. Norway, Sweden, and Scotland in terms of Europe. Poland is coming along as well. Portugal. Spain has a center for regenerative aquaculture that they're just opened, I think, this year, and I think it's actually fully open now. So that's great. They have multiple species, multiple both macroalgae, different mussels and oysters. So
here in Newfoundland, it's going to be interesting to see how the blue economy reshapes rural life and rural economy. Talking about the fishermen, one of the three farmers that we're talking with now, one is transitioning from mussels to seaweed. They already have.
Why can't you have both?
She might. I think they're trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
But I mean, they already have the equipment, like the boats, and the know-how, the industry, business already set up. And our harvester is also a fisherman.
Each one of Margarita has a path. Courtney, you have another path. But in the end of the day, I believe that both are trying to get to the same place, right? Expand this market of blue economy. The question that I have is, how do you see, for each one of you, there's a little bit different aspect. How do you see this growing in the next 5, 10 years?
I I have seen, we have been doing this since from the moment we started working with seaweed, it was around 2016. So from the moment we started working with seaweed, it's almost like you have to justify why you're working with seaweed. You have to explain it because especially at the beginning, people's reaction to it was just like this ick factor, like, oh, that's just something I walk over on the beach. And, fast forward now to even 2024, the knowledge that people have is so much greater than it was even back in, 2020. So for me, I just see at a point, I don't know what the tipping point is, but I can see a point where it'll be more exponential growth as people's knowledge of well, for us, it's for seaweed, of its bioactives, of its multifunctionality. Um, and once people start getting results from what they're using from seaweed and probably other marine bioactives and other parts of the blue economy, it'll eventually have an exponential growth. I don't know what that tipping point might be. Margarita might have a better sense of it.
It's interesting how you said the reaction of people. I also had similar reactions when I tell people that I'm transitioning into this field. Why, it's interesting. Not, I think people have this very specific idea of seaweeds, and it's coming along. I think there's more products out there. People are getting a bit more educated. It's for the future, for climate change, for the fact that more and more farms are going to be dedicated to producing carbon credits, the blue carbon credits. There's more and more opportunities. The laws are going to be more heavier, and you're going to have to use more transparent ingredients. And you can track it. Most blue ingredients, you can track where it comes from, especially the extracts. And it's just going to be a more standardized way of life, and I think it's going to be a great industry. We've always had the oceans. It's been a legitimate industry for many centuries, millennia really. So it's going to be something that we will continuously see growing. Thinking for the future of this industry, we need more partnerships and we need more education as well.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're doing aquaculture, community involvement is a big thing, is getting the community involved and getting them to approve the farms. Without that, we're not going to have much of a future. But I definitely see more products. The plastic aspect of it is very exciting. Materials, I can see leathers being done. And it's not just seaweed. I think we talk a lot about seaweeds, but let's talk about mussels. The fact that shells were traditionally used in construction. If you mix, I think, what is it, 25 to 35% of concrete with shells from oysters or from mussels, it's really strong and it lasts longer and it's more eco. So I think in the construction field, same with the sargassum, which is harvested in the Caribbean. It's invasive because there's just too much of it, like SOS Carbon, companies that harvest it and then they make fertilizers, cosmetic ingredients. Carbon Wave makes Sea Balance 2000, which is an emulsifier. And that's another thing, is take the extracts, wonderful, but we need emulsifiers, we need surfactants, we need hydrosols, we need oil, we need the whole lot. We have to always look for
It's
new
not just
sources.
stopping. It's not just stopping at extraction. You
Yeah.
need all the production chain to
Yeah, and we
process
need
this.
yeah,
And
and we need to think outside the box, because the problem with a lot of algae and micro extracts right now is you're putting in at 1%, and that as a formula, it doesn't make a formula blue at all. You need it to be 50% blue. So let's think about all the ingredients that we can make. Let's think about all the ways a formula can have marine extracts.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how the differences are made. Yeah.
so one thing that was very interesting when Courtney mentioned was like the farmers, right? Because I imagine that if you have a farm with seaweed, you're probably going to attract more fish, more whatever. You're going to attract more ocean creatures to that spot, and that also probably help the smaller fish to thrive, to grow, and in that way increasing the population. Is there any study? There is universities working with those farmers to see all of those. bad emitters?
Yes, there is. There is quite a lot of research that's being developed. Um, and then I think one of the fears is with aquaculture, because on a mass scale, actually you can damage the environment with aquaculture. It's impossible not to know this, because if you're doing, especially within Asia, you can actually block too much light. A lot of the seaweeds do act like a blocker for UVA, UVB rays, which is great as a potential feature for SPF or for fabrics, but really bad for the life under. So you can actually kill habitats if you don't do it correctly, if you don't space out the lines correctly, if you don't, you have to take breaks, so it has to be done in a smart way. We have a record of damage in certain parts of the world from over aquaculture that was done too aggressively. But I think that is another thing that happened in the past, mainly in Asia, where it was grown for food and it was needed all the time. So we know now the limits, because we're doing multi-tropic, so there's different species. It's integrated into the environment, and it's a lot better.
Yeah, it kind of highlights the importance of that interdisciplinary, and the collaboration.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Another thing is there's a huge tech aspect. I don't think people realize, but robotics is huge for this industry. When you have a farm, there's a lot of buoys in there, and they can go in, they read the level of activity. There's robotics that study the water environment. It's a lot now. You can have cameras that will tell you how, instead of going out all the time, you can save money on that. There's a lot of robotics in this industry that's being developed. I have a good 10, 15 companies off the top of my head that do this. And there's both robots, floating buoys, there's nets that have things programmed into them. So there's a lot of really cool things out there. There really is.
Let's move away from the science for the consumer, right? Because sometimes
Yeah.
we might be talking all of this. Someone that might be watching this, like, okay, but what is one product that already has on the grocery store and the drugstore that I know that might be using seaweed, and I was not expecting this?
Toothpaste, hopefully.
Toothpaste. Hopefully you're using toothpaste. Yes.
Shampoo. Thickeners, right? Thickeners are often alginates, agars, and things like that. So that's in a lot of products. And then ice cream even has it, right? A lot of the modern ice creams have at least carrageenan in it for that. Yeah.
So it's not that far.
Milk has it. And that's why there's allergies to certain things, and you don't know why. It's not necessarily to ice cream. There's a lot of things on it. Let's debunk the biggest myth, and is the fact that seaweed is bad for you, because you get iodine irritation from it. It's very rare. This is a huge part of the industry. A lot of retailers have seaweed on a banned list, and it also irritates me. They say algae or seaweed, just general, like they're all the same. This is breeding fear into this industry unnecessarily. The iodine levels, and Courtney, you can confirm this, is very small. The ingredients are very processed. They're not going to poison you, so there's no worry of that. And the thing is, with high iodine, it can inflame the skin, and this is why there's some retailers that'll say that, oh, why can't we use acne? Why can't we use algae? Because it's going to cause acne, it's going to inflame the skin, it's going to cause redness, and it's going to break you out, and it's comedogenic. So all of this is what is being said, and none of it is true. It's in fact the opposite.
It is the very opposite, very, very opposite of that. I know, just like from our side with the products that we make, and we do formulate in high percentages, I just take our lotion as an example. Over 60% of it is our extract, and that's on purpose, because our goal is to get these bioactives from seaweed, which, we educate our consumer on along the way. It's actually some of the most useful ingredients that you can put in and on your body, because of what it does. I mean, on the surface of the skin, it's some of the most hydrating ingredients come from seaweed. And the most calming ingredients also come from seaweed, and coming from those same bioactives. The same bioactives that are going to hydrate and moisturize are the ones that are going to calm. And we know, through our bioactivity testing, that they block inflammation receptors, and they're literally helping to build skin.
Yeah.
And that's only on the surface of the body. That's not even to talk about how useful bioactives from seaweed are inside of the body as well. So
That's a
yeah,
huge
we
part as
have to get
well.
around the idea that seaweed's going to harm you from iodine. A lot of that gets lost during extraction anyway.
It does, and this is what really irritates me because all of a sudden, when you're speaking to labs, oh, I can't use this because this retailer isn't allowing it. It's on a no-no list. It's comedogenic. It's going to break me out. It's not true. So that is something that I feel needs to be highlighted by everyone in this industry, especially within cosmetics, that it's okay to use it.
Yeah,
And
I would imagine that's very different in Asia because they have so much stuff about the oceans in general, but seaweed too. So I think they would not be too afraid about this problem. So is
no,
this
no.
more like a regional?
It's in regional, like, or North America is a pretty big region, but
Yeah,
I definitely find it's very active here. I haven't heard these from other parts of the world, but that's something that gets brought up quite often. And then another interesting thing is it's again not just seaweeds, and you can use my favorite example is starfish extract from Korea. There's
Mm-hmm.
a company called StarTech, and they extract, they take the invasive starfish, they make extract out of it, they make de-icer that's organic out of it, and then they have a cosmetic brand that they have with their ingredients as a, as a very profitable proof of concept. Amazing formulas, and it's an amazing ingredient, and they use it at really high percentages, also like 14 to 16% of this very small extract, essentially, in all of their formulas, and it's has all of the different anti-aging and miracle claims for the skin. So it's not just always, and this is an interesting one because actually they do transdermal coating, so it's encapsulated. So it's an encapsulated marine collagen, essentially. It's also done from jellyfish, potentially. It can be done from sea cucumbers. So there's urchins are also a source. The problem with that is even if they're invasive or byproducts of the food industry, so it's a great way to get rid of waste. Most places, especially the big companies like L'Oreal, they're not going to allow food or animals grade things ever into their products, even if it's sustainably sourced or a waste ingredient. So that's a very big shame because it's different between testing on animals and using a waste from the food industry, all because it's
one
animal
que-
based.
one question that I have is, and I think that Courtney is going to be able to explain this a little bit better for me because you're producing something. You harvest the seaweed, and then you extract your solution. What happens to the remainder of the product? Uh,
Right now, we compost it.
you
But
Yeah.
compost.
we are also talking with other final producers about if they can use it, like those who are working with bioplastics made from seaweed.
I
Um,
see.
so actively looking for a final source for that end product after we extract. But right now we compost it.
Yeah.
But
So that
we do seaweed baths here.
Yeah.
That we have a more tourist based business. 7 Fathoms grew out of that one.
Yeah.
And we offer seaweed baths here. So one of the things that we can do with our final seaweed after we extract, because there's still bioactivity
Yeah.
left in that seaweed, is incorporating it into our seaweed bath experience here as
nice,
well. Yeah,
nice.
but as we grow, I mean, and we're still at a small level, but it's what we're talking with others so that we can connect it when we get to a larger scale.
Yeah.
Is
And
there any major players already
uh,
on the blue
uh,
economy?
there is, and just going back to your question, pet feed or animal feed would be the biggest by like the last stage. It's also cheap in terms of the scale, cosmetics and pharma being the best, and this one being a little bit of the cheapest per kilo. And it's often the waste, especially, and it's good for like sheep and cows because it decreases methane production. So it helps with all the ruminants, and they traditionally would, in the coasts, eat the sheep, and the cows would go out and they would eat seaweed, and they still do in some parts of the world. And then it's often put also as it's a fertilizer for many companies. They'll buy the final and then they'll put it into the soils to regenerate soil.
Yeah.
Because
So
I guess there is a lot of fibers there, and
yeah,
that's something.
it's really good for plants, for basically regenerating soil. There's so many projects around the world done with this, and we're often struggling with soil. I mean, due to wars around the world now, we have a huge fertilizer crisis. So this is something that is helping the industry boom a little bit. And then in terms of the big players, there's ingredient companies. A lot of ingredient companies have blue economy ingredients. Almost all of them do, actually, if you think about it. If you go through their large, but then there's like Codif, Oceana, Macro Ocean, some of the newer ones that have been established more with just their ingredients. But if you look at Givaudan, they have microalgae as well. Um, and just quickly, macroalgae are the big seaweeds, and then microalgae are the smaller seaweeds, and then they're microscopic basically, and they can become all different colors, and they're grown in tanks almost entirely
Mm.
inland. I think a lot of people don't know the difference between the two. Yeah.
It is a new sector,
It's
and
an
as
it's a
all.
I mean I think the first just trying to think about it, is it 2000 millennia 2000 BC, I think, is when the Chinese started growing it. So
Mhm.
Okay, so it's
uh
not new.
not new, no. Maybe new for us in the way that we're seeing it,
Mhm.
but not new at all. And the indigenous populations of Canada and other parts of the world have been growing it in New Zealand. So it's new the way that we're positioning it. I think maybe we stepped away from it and industry is finally catching up.
Mhm.
But I think there's a big think about the water. Look at oysters and mussels and how they clean water. There's the what is it, the billion project, oyster project in the Bay of New York City. That's an amazing where they're growing a lot of mussels and oysters, and they're going to try to get the water cleaned, which can go the wrong way because I'm in Ontario, in Toronto, and we have a mussel contamination, and our Great Lakes are sterile. In fact, that we have so much mussels that which were brought in from Mediterranean through the shipping wastewaters, and now are basically they filter the water so much that all of the phytoplankton, it kills everything. I mean, it doesn't kill it, it just sterilizes everything. It eats everything.
Mm.
So basically, the fish and the algae, they're completely decreased, and there's no habitats for the fish, and our fishing is done almost completely. Our last fishery has about, which is in Lake Huron, has about maximum 5 years left. Then they won't be able to
Mm.
sustain themselves. Um, and that's where regenerative growing would come back. So too much mussels and too much of a clean lake becomes a sterile environment. Yeah.
Yeah, it's about shifting our way of thinking too. It's the blue economy is not new, but the way of thinking about it is. It's how can we use the blue economy sustainably and get into mainstream, solving, getting into the mainstream and solving our so many problems that we have can be affected by just accepting and absorbing solution within the blue economy.
Yeah.
Just a different way of thinking.
So the question that I have is, let's say someone wants to start in the blue economy, some venture in blue economy. What are the challenges they can expect?
Yeah, I think anyone getting into this, I mean, you kind of have to do that proof of concept
Yes,
first.
you do. You do.
I mean, the reason why we do it start to finish is because we have to right now. If we want to be in market, then we need to be the harvester, we need to be the extractor, we need to be the final product maker. But at the same time, we're talking to our farmers. We're validating, validating our extraction process, validating our products, and then looking forward to how do we scale this? Well, we do that by partnering with others to do it. But it's in the beginning, you kind of have to, you have to prove it. You have to
You have to do it. Yeah.
and do it. Yeah.
So I'm guessing this is the side of creating the product. And then there's the other side, which is selling this to your client.
Yeah.
How was this process for you, Courtney? Once you're like, okay, we have this, but people don't know this. How was the process to telling the story to people and making this a product, viable
In
product?
in the beginning, it was more challenging But the reason why we got into this industry was out of need. So I tell this story all the time, and we didn't start telling this story until much later. But we started doing this because of a walk on the beach and because of a great skin need. My husband had basically an open wound on his abdomen from a severe case of contact dermatitis that stemmed from an allergy to plastic. He has Crohn's, he has an ileostomy, he can't avoid the exposure. And he was over 2 years into this, and he'd been to everyone for help. This coincided, and again, we live right on the ocean. We took a walk on the beach after a big storm. The storm had pushed the seaweed ashore, and he noticed this, beautiful, some people might say icky, we say beautiful, gel coming out of the seaweed. And just by chance and because of his curiosity, he put that gel on his skin. And within a week of applying raw extract to his skin was healing. So when we started telling this story to people after we already had a product in market, because again, we had a more tourist-based business, so we had access, even though we're in a really rural area, we had access to people from all over the world trying the product. And what got people around the ick factor was when we connected them with Terrence's story. So ick factor gets pushed aside when people realize it's effective. So that is what has helped us all along the way. And then people try it. And then now people come back and, it's even after that first summer of selling the product, people were saying, oh, this helped mine. And then they filled in the blank with whatever skin issue they were having. So I think when you can get people past the way that you get people past the ick factor or whatever reservations they have about it, is that this works. This is effective. And we now start talking about the mechanisms of action within the seaweeds that are helping. It's these bioactive compounds and the trace minerals and the combination of them that just, have this synergistic effect on the skin and in the body. And I have definitely noticed over the years that the conversation is getting easier. Because people it's working for people. Yeah, that's what's going to get people beyond it. It works.
There is no better storytelling than results.
Yeah.
If you show the results, people are going to buy it, right? People are going to buy it. Yeah. So that's interesting. But I'm guessing it was an uphill battle from the beginning too.
I mean, we live in rural Newfoundland and going into a new industry, transitioning from one to the other. We must just gravitate towards uphill battles. I don't know, but it is with a purpose. And it's, you know what? It's also incredible the people you meet along the way when you're in this uphill battle, because you meet others who share similar values and who are working towards in their own way, working towards new economy.
It's exciting times for people trying to go into this field, to this sector. But I want to know what keep you guys up at night when you think about this.
I think funding is one of them, as with everything. Regulatory is right now I'm looking at some farming projects and just figuring out, can we get licensing? How does licensing work? Sometimes the licensing is only for a few years, so then you have to make sure the pilot succeeds. Will the crop die? So that's a big, I think, and it can happen. Things like that when you look at actual aquaculture. And when it comes to the production side of it, I work with a lot of different ingredient companies, and I see people invest a lot of money into science. It does not guarantee sales. So I see companies that, and then you're trying to see the balance between how much do you want. I know companies that have amazingly refined extracts, but they're just too expensive. Distributors can't take them, so you still have to think about margins. You still have to have your business hat on and think about, how will distributors sell this? How is logistics going to work? Is it going to be a powder? Is it going to be a liquid? will I make the initial investment ever back because it's only used at 3%? Or I think the most successful ingredient in the market has to be, in the past few years, hands down, sea balance. It works. It works for distributors. The margins are there. It's the story is great. It's a very financially viable. You can use it at a lot of different percentages, and it does so many different things in a formula. So we need more ingredients like that, emulsifiers, surfactants, things like that. Maybe away from, which is really ironic because when you look at claims, you're either looking at hydration or cleansing for cosmetics. You're not really looking at anything else because the minute you go somewhere else, for example, inflamed skin, that's drug. You're gonna have to pay drug prices. So unless you have the drug money, which most of us do not, it ends up being something that not smart to invest in the first few years, right? Unless you become unless you partner, I think, with a pharma company. But looking at hydration claims is a lot easier to do, or covering claims. There's a lot of claims, dry skin barrier only associated with dry skin in North America. So when it comes to research, actually, you can't do that much.
Yeah.
Yeah, because so who are you selling it to? I think the small cosmetic market is great potential, which they can't have actives because actives are expensive, and for 5 kilos at $200-300 a kilo, no one's going to be buying it from. But there's about 150,000 soap makers registered in North America. Just to the guild, so there's probably way more. And there's only 6,000 companies registered with the Society of Cosmetic Chemists. Maybe 8,000 now. But that's not a lot compared to the other number. So if you sell 1 kilo of something to those 100,000, you're selling 100,000 kilos versus trying to convince one or two of the 6,000 to take 10 kilograms a year for their experiments. So it's a numbers game. It really is. And until companies start thinking about that, they're not going to be financially viable.
Yeah.
It hurts. It hurts when I see like years of research, and they just do not have the sales because it doesn't correlate, unfortunately.
No.
It will for L'Oreal. It will for LVMH, but there's only 5 or 10 of them now, of the big ones. If you have a contract with them, that's amazing. But to get the mass sales, you have to look at pricing and just general availability of ingredients.
Yeah, for us, I always go back to that more tourist-based business that we still have. It has served us so well in growing 7 Fathoms because it helped us to start validating and getting the testimonials, which is important to this to be able to grow. But the funding to be able to grow a new company like this when you're working with new ingredients it's a struggle.
When you talk about funding, what are the sources of funding right now? Is government funding? There is private funding? What do you guys experience regarding this?
For us, the funding that we've been able to access is more provincial. Helping. We have a lot of programs that may provide marketing support at like a 50-50 cost share, which just has allowed us to start building the brand. We're now in a National Research Council program, which is aimed at commercialization. It's their IRAP program. That's helped us to be able to dedicate our time to growing and not just, we have our other business. We relied on a restaurant in a rural area to survive. So it's allowed us to shift and allowed us to reach a point of validation to garner other attention and interest in the company. It's incremental.
It's smart. It's smart to have multiple streams in the beginning. There's a lot more funding, I think, in Europe right now. There is for companies. I think it's 70% of the grant will cover up to 1.3 million euros. And it's for projects in the EU, and you basically for all aquaculture, marine related, specifically for regenerative aquaculture, There's funds from the UN, and that's the big focus for the UN is to develop aquaculture in lesser developed countries. So I think that is a big actual, and that's where a lot of climate change needs to happen as well. So thinking about those opportunities, it doesn't always have to be in North America. There's the rest of the world, and it does good to society. And then for Canada, there is a grant directly with the UK. So as long as you're willing to travel to other places as well, there is money, collaborating with other companies, but it's hard. Locally, I'm in Toronto. Investors do not understand. I've talked to them a few times, and they just kind of stare at you. They just don't understand. It's not a traditional thing. A lot of people are from banking, and they're used to maybe crypto being exotic, but or lumber, or fisheries, but not seaweed.
Yeah. So it has been almost an hour. I think we can do our final remarks. It has been very informative. I have learned a ton of stuff,
Well,
and I just have more and more questions. And I'm very interested to be part of this in whatever capacity. So, Margarita, why don't you start?
I just wanted to say it's been wonderful, and I can talk about this all day, every day. And I just think that it's good to ask questions. More people need to, because that's how they learn the answers. And we're going to be building the Beauty by the Sea as we transition out of the cluster website. We're going to have the own website. So we're going to be beautybythesea.com, and it's going to be really dedicated to the brands, to the resources, really building a page, and not just to cosmetics. There'll be all different types of industries, but really dedicated to supporting all the different arms of blue economy, and really helping people with that.
Yeah.
Courtney?
Yeah, I really appreciate the opportunity to be a part of the conversation and to add to, that education of the industry and its uses and how it can really help to solve real world issues that we have in a very sustainable way. It's an opportunity for us all.
Yeah.
It is. And I don't think we have too much time to keep messing up with our earth.
No,
So we
no,
have to figure it out a way to make it better. We have to do better.
Yeah. And Diego, you and I have talked about, and this is a great time to talk about that very briefly, is we're planning to do the Beauty by the Sea documentary next year to really talk about and to interview people. So if anyone's watching this and interested, they can contact us to be part of the documentary. Our goal is to show the supply chain hands-on, or at least film on, to really visit the sites and show people both underwater and above water, how it looks like, and the processing. And it's a very textile industry, right? You need to see it and you need to feel it, and that's what I like about it. And almost all of us have some sort of experience with water, and they don't realize that all the life that's underneath, right?
Yeah. For those of you that were watching this, asking yourselves, why is this guy in there? That's the reason why.
Yes.
We are creating a project together next year, and I'm the guy with the camera. So that's the reason.
The guy with the camera, the guy with the vision. Yes.
Exactly. Thank you very much. That was from my side. The only thing that I can imagine is I'm very interested to learn more and try to understand how we could accelerate this penetration to the market, to the consumers, because that's what I do. I create stories. I try to imagine how to. I have a very strong background in science, and I do a lot of this science translation to the public. And I start to hear your stories, I start to think, how can we do something to accelerate this? So thank you for giving me this nudge of knowledge, and we talk more soon.
Thank you
very much.